Hey team, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I am joined by Mr. Greg Mills. You guys are in for a treat. He's got a storied background in the agriculture industry that we're going to find out more about as we go through the show today. But let's start with this. Greg, welcome to the show.
Uh, Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Super excited. Greg has got a background in association work. He spent 25 years with ADM in the crop insurance arena. He has got an incredible background. You guys are going to get to learn from that. But let's give him the same opening question that everybody gets. Greg, what does it mean for you to be intentional?
Intentional in leadership for agribusiness means to me that your leadership style is one that is open, communicative, involving the colleagues, delegating decision making, and having a bigger mission and vision so that people see the full impact of their work on the world per se. Okay. In my experience at Golden Peanut and Tree Nut, which was my recent role inside ADM, we talked about peanuts and tree nuts and how they affected, they reduced the impact of, they reduced diabetes in the world. They reduced cardio disease in the world, and they were good protein and they were cheap globally. So we could feed people in the world a good protein laced diet that would help them improve their nutrition, so that all of our colleagues inside Golden Peanut and Tree Nut would know their impact on the world and their job. And it also involves an environment where the leader is open and forthright and even vulnerable, willing to discuss mistakes and willing to discuss failings so that the team can grow together and develop the business together.
Yeah. I'm curious, if I may, if you think about people's connection, employees' connection to that mission, as you talk about, with your last engagement with Golden Tree and Peanut, it's this connection to we're doing good in the world, right? How do you drive that connection? Is it communication? Is it strategy? Is it just beating the drum with that consistently and telling that story internally? Give us a little bit of insight, if you would. How do we get employees connected to that deeper mission? Because otherwise, it can just seem like, hey, we're selling peanuts.
Well, there's a story here in my experience
Yeah.
that I experienced directly in Golden Peanut and Tree Nut, and previously with ADM Crop Risk Services. I was running the crop insurance business. You have to come up with a consistent message that you repeat consistently and with volume. So we involved a marketing company to do some marketing internally, because your colleagues need to be convinced of the mission first before they can convince your customers. So we spent a lot of time informing people that our mission was to raise peanuts and sell them to the world for three reasons. One, they reduce diabetes, they reduce cardio disease, and they're a cheap protein for some of the lesser fortunate places in the world that need protein in their diet. And we repeated it over and over. We built a campaign internally so that it became part of documents and part of every leader's speech on the leadership team. And I knew I was successfully getting the mission through when I was down in Blakely, Georgia, visiting a specialty protein plant, and the hourly employees told me the mission of the company. So I was able to get down about 5 or 6 layers in the company, and they, unprovoked, unassisted, informed me of the mission of the company. So we did a pretty good job. But you need that consistency so that you can build that culture, because it's easier to be intentional if everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, that's a great story. And so effectively, it's kind of like a stump speech, right? And you think about a politician hitting the road during the season, the campaign season, you hear the same thing at every stop along the way, right?
Well, it's a lead in to the opening of the speech. This is why we're going to make this asset change. This is why we're going to reorganize our people, because it makes us more efficient to get the job done. That is reducing diabetes, reducing cardio disease, and feeding cheaper protein around the world. So it's easier to explain what you're doing when it's consistent with your mission and vision. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people miss that, because we'll often come up with whatever the process change or the equipment change or policy change is, and we just say, hey, we've got to do this because it's what's best for the company, but we don't actually know what is the outcome of the company's work.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
I've been fortunate, and then I've been a journeyman and been in about 15 industries inside ADM. So one of the things that's helped me become productive in a job that I might not have really enjoyed. You have that job that you're doing because it's your job, And it doesn't always taste the best in the morning, but you have to do it anyway because you've got a wife and kids and a livelihood that you're creating. You have to think of the bigger picture. So whether I was selling grains in the Mediterranean or fixing ships in Asia, the idea was I was being more efficient in the world so I could get food to people at a lesser price so that they could feed their families,
Yeah.
in a more
Yeah.
efficient and cheaper way. So try to build a bigger picture for your colleagues if you're the leader, or for yourself, which you are a leader of yourself, and make that bigger picture so that you're more effective solving world problems instead of just stamping papers and shipping them to the next desk.
Yeah. So good. All right, guys, we're only 5.5 minutes into this thing. And if you don't get anything else, just we go back and re-listen to the last 60 seconds. That's a masterclass that Greg is dropping on you guys right there. And we're only into the first question, so I'm sure it's only going to get better. Greg, you mentioned 15 different industries that you've been able to touch just through your work at ADM. A great career there. And what would you say? I mean, from a culture standpoint, what makes or breaks great culture? If you could give us a little bit of a class on, your experience with building culture and attracting talent, retaining talent with it, and those things.
I've got a couple stories I can share that'll maybe help
Yeah,
clarify it
great.
a little bit. But in my experience, the most important thing for retaining culture and building a good culture is what the leader does when the lights aren't on him, okay, or her.
Mm,
That matter.
mm.
Does the leader live the message that they're portraying to the company, or does the leader abandon the message that they're portraying to the company when they're not under the lights? Okay. And so, for example, I fell into this by accident. Okay. In the crop insurance business, we decided that because the crop insurance adjusters were climbing bins and putting themselves at risk to measure bins and check a farmer's production when they were applying for crop insurance claims, that was a safety issue. So we wanted to protect our adjusters. So we got safety supplies for them so that they could have a 3-point of contact. They could measure bins without having to use some non-reliable tools. They could be more accurate tools. They could have a harness. And we ordered that. We needed to get that out to the colleagues because we had some safety standards we wanted to live by. We were, by the way, the first crop insurance company to introduce safety techniques for the adjusters climbing in bins.
Okay. Wow.
The truck showed up with the safety supplies after everybody had gone home, and I just happened to be there at night by myself. And I thought, well, okay, I'll unload this stuff and put it in the conference room so they can share it with the adjusters when they come in for the next working day, and get the supplies into the field so we can help these guys. And so I unloaded the truck just because I thought, well, I mean, the work's got to get done. I can't send the truck away. It's here and it's got to be unloaded. A couple people were there and they helped in, they chipped in. And so then I started to hear a story come around that the president of the company is unloading a truck so that we can have safety supplies. And that really became something that reverberated for a while because I wasn't somebody who walked away from it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was someone who was willing to do the menial task. All right. So oftentimes I think that the way the leader treats the more menial work and the more menial, I hate to say it this way, staff down the organization is a better witness of how the leader is seen and how they set the culture.
Wow. That's a really incredible answer, by the way. I love the story.
I
I love.
I only did it because the truck was there, okay? And
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking about it, but it turned out to be something that by experience and by accident helped people to see that even, everyone needs to chip in.
Yeah, of course. And also, Greg, what I found is that those who set out to be intentional leaders, whether they give it that label or not, those who strive to be intentional leaders will find themselves naturally walking into opportunities that help them to establish and further that message and establish what they are. I mean, I believe that the Lord puts us in positions to sort of edify some of those things that he wants us to be doing. In my opinion, the most intentional leader that there ever was. Right. And so, opportunities get presented to further solidify the things that are most important. And it's not just about, reducing insurance costs for the company. It's about keeping people safe and making sure that they go home alive, right? With all of the parts.
In this particular instance, we added cost to the adjusting, but we wanted to keep people safe and make sure they were protected when they were climbing bins and the like. And actually, it turned out that we reduced costs because when we were promoting ADM CRS as a place to work, the adjusters got the message that we were actually dearly concerned, realistically and truthfully concerned with their safety. which is an important message to get to people.
Right. And so establishing that as we call in our work, we call that a little bit of the attractor factor. Like this is what we stand for. This is what we tolerate. This is what we won't tolerate. And that actually attracts people to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
It helped us quite a bit, actually. It was a good, I hate to say it because it sounds kind of crass, selling point. You call it a tractor factor. It was a good differentiating point from the other companies in the business at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. What, when it comes, I'm sure you've seen lots of talent initiatives, whether it's recruiting initiatives. And I remember the ADM recruiter coming to the University of Minnesota to the St. Paul campus when I was a freshman, sophomore, junior, going to the career fair up there at the U of M. What has worked in your experience to be able to retain the best talent, attract and retain the best talent for you?
A couple things. One, it's selection. Okay.
Mm.
And so when I first started in the crop insurance company in 2009, it was the smallest crop insurance company in the business. And in order to be successful, you had to scale up because insurance is a business that requires scale. So we were 75 souls in the good ship lollipop called ADM Cropper Services, which I got to name, by the way. So I picked each of
Oh,
them.
really?
Yeah. And we were going to have to be 550 to 600 people. So I took the leadership team into a conference room and I explained to them that I wasn't going to be there to make the decision on every employee or colleague we were going to hire, that they were going to be making the decisions. Therefore, we're going to sit and have some training together and spend some time having some consensus discussions around the kind of people we wanted and the like, because I wasn't going to be there to make the decisions for them. So we needed to make good decisions. So we spent some time training and talking through that. And the second thing was to build a culture that people would want to stay in. So a culture that would encourage even new people to suggest ideas to make the process better, to suggest ideas to impact the customer better. And that doesn't mean that there's no process, okay? With adjusting claims in crop insurance, we decided to get a process, the perfect process put together. So we brought the senior adjusters together and said, what would a perfect claim look like? Okay. We had about a 6-step process for a perfect claim. And I hired somebody to call people who experienced that process. They insured the farmer after the process was over and say, did the adjuster do this? Did the adjuster do that? So we set kind of a standard for them. Not that it would be perfectly held, but then we communicated that. And the standard was set with the consensus of the leadership in adjusting. So we had a standard they could work for and they could achieve. And we had a way to show that it benefited the company. And we let people change the standard if they wanted to come forward and suggest things that could be done differently. And so we built kind of a standard of behavior because the idea was to build a brand and a culture that people could be proud of. When I got the crop insurance, your adjuster might be that guy that showed up in overhauls and torn shirts and the like. And I put them all in uniforms because I was thinking about the Maytag repairman.
Sure.
I wanted them to be recognized as ADM when they came to the farm and not as, the junior high school basketball coach that's working this summer doing hail claims in Iowa. And so we try to differentiate people and build kind of an esprit de corps. So one thing, picking the right people. And then the other thing is creating an environment where people can participate, express themselves, get engaged in the culture, even talk critically, if necessary, of an existing process that we would adjust to make it work better for everybody.
Yeah. But you're reminding me something. I like to put things into frameworks, if you will, and we have something at Momentum Company called the 5E process, and it goes enlist, and then equip, and then empower, and then evaluate.
Oh, that's
Right?
good.
And then if the evaluations are moving in the right direction, right, then we enlarge someone's territory, we give them more responsibility, or we grow the business, right, those kinds of things. And so as you're talking through that, it's exactly that. Like we're enlisting the right people, we're equipping them with what they need to be successful, whether it's a uniform, whether it's safety equipment, whether it's training, right? And then you're empowering them to go out and follow the process. So good. I mean, I really love what you're sharing there because in my experience, being in a consulting role, stepping into a company, a lot of times we have frustrated employees or usually we have a frustrated leader, and that's why we get hired to begin with. And we quickly find we've also got frustrated employees, but there's a lack of clarity to that process.
Yeah.
And it actually costs them not only time and money because of the frustration day to day and lost productivity, but it's costing us talent.
Yeah, I agree, and I also would stress that probably the most important job for an intentional leader is to create the environment of clarity so that the
Mhm.
mission of the work is understood, the how the work is to be achieved is understood, and repeat it over and over and over. A lot of leaders I know think that if they say it once or twice, it's clear. And it's never been my experience that once or twice or even thrice would work. It has to be part of your opening statement of your conversation and your closing statement, so that it's repeated over and over and over, and
Yep.
then it's kind of understood. And it has to be followed up by behaviors as well. You can't set a process that is your process that you expect people to live to, and then the leader doesn't live to that process.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay. I we could just continue going so much deeper on this because I think there's a master class in there. I'm gonna move on to the next one, but yeah, thank you for sharing that because clarity. We consider clarity to be a leading indicator of lagging success.
Mm. I agree.
Where,
If the
you
if
know,
the if the mission, vision, the message is understood through the whole company, they're interlocked to execute together. If
Hmm.
it's not, the only person's fault if it's not is the leader's fault, because the leader has to drive the team to get that message out. You need to teach your leadership team to replicate your leadership.
Mm. Yeah, and when we think about intentional leadership, to be intentional requires that you actually block time to go get strategic.
Yeah.
Right? To develop strategy, to come up with your talking points and decide who you are, what you're about, what your culture will and won't tolerate, right? And actually write that down and develop your stump speech and have your three things that you express in every meeting and every speech that you give and every talk and every, major piece of communication that goes out. This is who we are, this is what we're about, this is what we're producing. I find very few leaders who do that, unfortunately.
That's my experience as well. I've been led by a lot of people, but not many leaders do that. Normally,
Mhm.
if the trouble has arrived, they're reacting to the trouble by
Mhm.
shooting from the hip for the most part, or reacting to the trouble by drawing the closest people they have on a comfort level together instead of the structural people that will get the message out through the company. And then they wonder to themselves, why are we responding better? Why are we not more efficient? Why are we not more productive? Why aren't people more engaged? It's their
Mhm.
commitment to doing that, to making that clear leadership role understood and communication understood, that makes a difference in execution.
Mhm. Yep. And I'm hoping that people hearing you say that will recognize the importance of, well, first of all, the importance of it, but then understand that getting there, it's not just something that you come up with 15 minutes before the meeting.
Right. Well,
What
I'll give you a story, okay? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is 13 years ago. If you remember 2012 in the United States, it was a tremendous drought, okay?
Mhm.
And, I have enough years on me that I can remember when we had a tremendous drought in the mid-80s. In the
Mhm.
mid-80s, before crop insurance, we had a tremendous drought in Central Illinois, and, I was working for Cargill then, and my first job was to put a guy out of business because of a margin call,
Mm.
because we didn't have crop insurance. And
Mhm.
my experience in Central Illinois at the time was the fact that because nobody knew what was gonna happen to the crop, kind of commerce seized up.
Yeah.
Banks didn't lend, you know, feed companies didn't lend. Everybody kinda stood and waited to see what happened to the crop. Well, fast forward to 2012, we have crop insurance. But it's
Yep.
different with crop insurance now because you really have to ask some serious questions to your adjuster and your crop insurance company. How am I gonna get covered? When's my check gonna show up? And you have to have some confidence in that. So as the drought was progressing from mid-May into late May into June, and we're taking pictures of corn in the field as it's coming out of the ground and growing up and then kinda slowly dying before it even turns into much that year. So I think it was
Mhm.
107 degrees on the first few days of July in Central Illinois. We got
Wow.
the adjuster team together, the adjuster supervisors together and said, "Look, we need to go out right away and proactively go to our people and say our insureds and say, 'Look, we're gonna be there for you. We're gonna get the checks for you. We're gonna take care of it for you,' so they have confidence in us. We can't just
Mhm.
have people." And we listed 2 or 3 questions that the insured might ask, "How quick can I get my check? How will it be managed? When will I be contacted?" so that the farmer could have some confidence that he had the full backing of the United States government through crop insurance, serving the American farmer. So we just wanted to reassure everybody because it was a desperate time. And my memory was commerce seizing up in the 80s, but it didn't. Okay, you never saw that because crop insurance covered that bill, and that's the success of crop insurance in the United States. But the idea was that we sat down as a team, strategized the message, proactively organized the message, and got prepared to tell people what the message would be so they would be comforted and reassured that the company was behind them.
That's a fantastic story and a fantastic example of being intentional, working with the team, thinking it through, coming up with a plan, executing against the plan. Strategy is not something that you do 15 minutes before you need to send the email.
It's thought out. And what made it really fun was that the senior sales leadership that needed to portray the message came up with the message themselves. And they came to me and told me what the message should be, and they were right. I said, well, okay, you've done my work for me, which is actually the proof that intentional leadership is working when your work is done for the leader before he gets a chance to really have to push for it to be done. Because people are seeing the needs of the company ahead of the leadership because they're farther out ahead of the company.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of leaders feel guilty taking the time to go be strategic. And they don't. They get busy doing a lot of other things. There's a lot of stuff on their list. I even think about our little company here this week. My wife and I lead this thing. We're out here taking a week to just be strategic for the company, going in, planning for 2026, right? How do we finish 25 really strong? How do we start 26 incredibly strong? What's that look like? What's the offer? All the things. And we'll go back and we're already starting to communicate parts of that to our team as we solidify and the puzzle pieces lock into place. But listen, there's other things that need to be done also. So there's a part of me that feels torn, right? Like I should be handling some of these other things right now, right? And I'm also like, I'm reminded of Covey's 7 Habits, which is, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is one of the most successful leadership books ever written. And what I found out recently, it took him 10 years to write the book.
Wow.
So he started writing the book 50 years ago, and now for 40 years has been a best-selling book every year on the topic of leadership. But what most people miss, that's impressive, but what most people miss is habit number 7. It should, in my opinion, he should have wrote it first.
Sharpening the sword.
Sharpening the saw, because most people miss it. They completely disregard it.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Thanks, son.
You have seen your fair share of difficult times, having gone through the drought and probably the lending crisis in the 80s. You've gone through 2012 and others. What for you, Greg, has been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
Well, probably the biggest challenge I've had to overcome is I've had to do this inside a large corporation. Most large corporations are not incented to create intentional leadership. They're incented to eliminate uncertainty and eliminate differences and become standardized and make that flywheel run as fast as it can. Because, if you earned 10 cents a share this quarter, they want 12 cents a share next quarter, and they want 14 cents a share the next quarter. They want predictable growth and profit and gains. They don't want Greg coming into their office saying, hey, if we bring everybody into the room and have a meeting, we can come up with a strategy. Why do you want to do that? Okay, just lower my costs a little bit and sell a little more. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that affects a lot of leaders in agribusiness because we look at volume and speed and pace of delivery instead of thinking strategically. So the biggest challenge I faced oftentimes was inside Cargill or inside ADM when I would want to take an intentional role because that's my natural style. I would have to deal with my boss who's saying, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And you just tell them what you want them to do and make them do it faster. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes my boss would call and say, I know you're trying to delegate and create leaders, but you need to start making decisions for them because we've got to get this done. That was probably the biggest challenge. And I didn't really recognize it, how different the cultures were and the clash in the cultures until I got several knots in different places on my skull from just having conflict at times. Then I realized it was a structural conflict. I mean, larger corporations are really flywheel focused. How fast can they go and how can they guarantee results? And they don't want a lot of experimentation. And that's why really they don't innovate very well. The innovation comes from medium to small size to smaller companies because they can do the intentional leadership and they can build the environment where everyone contributes to the success, not just the leader. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's been my experience.
It makes so much sense actually, and from the outside looking in, because I've always either been involved in small agribusinesses or self-employed, and so, it's whether we're intentional or not, that's on me. But, I know how challenging it is, as even with all the freedom and flexibility that I have to call the shots and build whatever it is that we wanna build. If we wanna wake up tomorrow and scrap the whole thing and start over, we can, and probably nobody will care and nobody will notice. But if you do that in a if you do that in a large organization, people will, and it would be incredibly disruptive. So I have a deep respect for those who have the steadfastness to stick it out and recognize the I I guess to me, it comes down to recognizing the game that you're in, and then learning how to play it really well.
Yeah, the gain is, for example, when I first arrived at Golden Peanut and Tree Nut, one of my first charges from corporate management was, you have 7 operating divisions, 4 of which are new to the company. You need to create a culture that they can all work around. We want you to create that culture. I thought, great. Finally, somebody gave me the bit and bridle for a horse that I can charge the Mustang around the corral with by myself. Boy, did I misread that. But regardless, we set off
Mm,
on a tour to create a culture that would create engagement. Okay.
mhm,
We wanted the message, which I gave you the message, and then we spent some time proactively, uh, collecting stories of colleagues that were impressive people.
mhm.
One gentleman adopted 3 brothers who were without a home, and they were gonna be split up by the social services, so he adopted all 3 kids. Just the special, unique colleagues we had at Golden Peanut and Trina. So we created about a 3 or 4-minute video of them and show the video and talk about how proud we should be of each person's contribution to the company. And we had businesses in South Africa and Argentina and Europe and California and Texas and Alabama, which might as well be a different country sometimes. And because California to Alabama is a longer way than it looks like in the geography.
Yeah.
We need to bring them all together. So we brought them all together with a mission and vision and with that kind of culture. And interestingly enough, Gallup did some surveying inside Golden Peanut and Trina, and after 2 years, our engagement levels moved from about 25% to about 55 to 65, and eventually 75 to 80%. One of the key
Wow.
questions they asked: would you recommend? Do you consider some of your colleagues a friend? Or would you recommend the job for a family member? And those were scored extremely high, and our turnover declined. Okay. The
Mm,
problem is that in a large corporation, that's not a metric they really look at, okay,
mhm,
on an operational basis. They're looking at speed and cost and the like, but it was very successful. One of our goals was we wanted our division inside ADM to be a division that people wanted to join,
mhm.
and we were able to see that. Same thing at crop insurance. I was able to see people that wanted to come into the division because of the culture and the environment that allowed for employee engagement, that encouraged engagement as
Yeah.
compared to other parts of the company.
If you had to sit down and make a hard decision, on prioritization, would you prioritize culture over getting the flywheel spinning? I know you have to do both at the same time in reality, but if you're thinking, "Okay, where are we gonna prioritize time and resources?" I mean, does it make sense to be culture forward, or what's your experience tell you?
My experience is that I can't remember who said this, but culture eats strategy for lunch. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you culture forward. If you create the culture, the speed moves so much faster. One of the key things about a good culture is trust. I don't
Mhm,
know if you've read that book called The Speed of Trust.
mhm.
Okay. It's quite a good book, actually. And they talk about the fact that trust has deteriorated so much that people check up on each other and they don't execute very quickly. And the example in the book was the purchase of the Burlington Northern Railroad by the Berkshire Hathaway Company. They didn't have to
Mhm.
go through the due diligence. They had a couple meetings with between the CEO of the Burlington Northern and Warren Buffett, and the deal was made, and the execution happened really quickly. When traditionally in that size of execution, it would take 12, 18, 24 months, and the targets would be moving while you're doing the due diligence. Okay. And so, I mean, I think trust is something you just have to build tremendously inside of a company, and that comes from culture forward. If people understand the culture and they trust it, they will execute a lot faster than the flywheel company. but the flywheel company is the standard model. And so because it's a risk to go culture forward, most people don't go culture forward.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think most leaders don't really have maybe a degree of self-confidence that they can lead the change. And so it's safer to default to just doing the flywheel thing.
I think that's absolutely correct because most leaders, when you talked about how do you want to be strategic and spend some time on strategy, most leaders come through operating roles where they're either in sales or merchandising or trading or hiring trucks. So they spend a lot of time reacting to inputs. The inputs come into them and they react. Okay. And that's what their success is, how fast I can turn around this inquiry, this sale, this transaction. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, they're in a role where they have to think a little bit and having quiet time, and they feel guilty because they have quiet time because they're not, chasing the ball all the time, and so they don't get strategic. And so that goes that, and that they fall back on what the past is instead of thinking strategically about what the future is needed to be. So my experience is that most people come up without leadership training, and it's
Yep.
hard. When I got my first leadership role, I sat back and thought, I better read about this.
Mm.
Bought books
Mhm.
like The First 100 Days. I bought Cotter's book on change. I bought a book, You're in Charge, Now What? To just look at
Mhm.
what the challenges were for taking over and having to be a leader all of a sudden. And it became
Yeah.
clear to me that you have to think of it as you're leading your kids. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
how would I lead my kids? And
Mm.
so I had to think of it in the sense that I'm the steward of this business. I'm not the owner. I'm not the omnipotent, all knowing dictator. I'm a steward of the business. What's best for the business
Mhm.
and the
I love
people.
it. Yeah. And there's our book recommendations, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Greg's recommending the first 100 days. If you're new in a leadership role, what was the other one? You mentioned two others, I think.
One was You're in Charge, Now What? And I
Yeah.
don't
Very
recall the author, but I have a
Mhm.
hard time recommending specific books because, if you go through Lencioni's library, he's got some good ones and some you wouldn't read. If you go through Cotter's library, he's got some good ones you would read or wouldn't read. Senge had a really book called uh, that's really good that's about 50 years old. Covey's got great books. Simon Sinek's got great books. Daniel Pink's book on Drive is really good.
It's a really
If you
good
read
one.
that. And this book recently that came out in the last decade by Angela Duckworth called Grit talks about
Mm.
how to select people that have really true grit. I mean, agriculture needs grit. It's
Mhm.
it's not an easy business. Okay, I'm not saying selling computers is easy either, but agriculture has a really well worn belief in work ethic and
Mhm.
truth and trust. And it's hard to live inside that environment and work really hard and be successful without having some grit because life ain't easy.
Mhm. Beautiful. Well, that's a great statement, and I appreciate you dropping all those books. What we do is we take the books that get mentioned on the show, and we harvest those and we put them into a resource library that we've created inside of our tool called Jericho. And so Jericho is actually a software tool that's driven by AI in the background. And
Mm.
so what our clients do is we'll put the employees in and we figure out it figures out what capabilities are required for this person to be excellent at what they do. And then Jericho figures out what books, what podcasts, what YouTube videos would be really valuable for Greg or for Mark to be moving forward in their role, and it puts them into like a playlist and it emails them out. And so we take those resources, and those are going to get included in someone's resource library to help them move forward on their capabilities, probably around leadership or management. So we appreciate them.
That's great. I mean, like I said, I had to study leadership when I was first given my first leadership role. But my belief in life is that leaders read and
Yep.
readers lead. And if you're going to be a leader, you better start reading because things are going to change. You're going to need some advice, and you're not going to know who to call to get it. You're going to have to find it yourself. So I've got about a 50 to 75 book library. I'll take a picture and send it to you. Okay.
Yeah, please do. Send it over. We're building that library. We want thousands and thousands of great resources in there. There's so many unique things and scenarios that people find themselves in, and
Mhm.
I appreciate you putting the exclamation point on it, which is that leaders read and readers lead.
Yeah. I
That
used
that
to
is
bring a book
that's
to my
there.
leadership meetings every month, and they called it the Greg Mills Reading Club. and I get eye rolls, and they tell me they were great dust collectors. But truthfully, the people that read and applied themselves to learning the new things, that were curious, as Ted Lasso said, about the
Yeah.
world, they achieved more and they moved faster than the people that just concentrated on the flywheel.
Mhm. Man. Greg, you've given us a master class today, and I know we've got a few more minutes here. I want to ask a couple more questions, but um, as we start to bring this in for a landing, can you just talk a little bit about like how do you keep your energy up? I mean, how have you kept your energy up as an executive? Lots of pressure, lots of things going on. I'm sure plenty of stress, probably a family too in the background, that you've been raising up over while running big businesses. And I mean, I don't know if you guys caught this in the beginning. Greg took a team, a startup team of 75 to over 500 in the insurance business. That was the goal, at least, that they were going to need. I mean, that's no small feat. How do you keep yourself together? How do you keep focused? How do you keep your capacity high?
Well, a couple thoughts for you. First off, one, that crop insurance business had a 5-year cumulative annual growth rate of about 33%. And so I mean, insurance doesn't grow that fast traditionally. So we were doing some
Yeah.
things that were different in the world. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself up? There's a great book called Peak Performers by Charles Garfield that was written years ago. And he talks about the fact that you have to focus your life in 2 or 3 areas. So I had to get focused down on 2 or 3 things, and I chose 3 things. I told family, church, and work, okay? I mean, I could have played golf 3 or 4 nights a week. I could have played golf on the weekends, but I couldn't dedicate that time and stay focused. So 1 is
Mhm.
focus. 2 is also remember to take care of yourself physically. Get exercise, eat right, because if the plant ain't working, the output's gonna be bad. And I didn't do that well initially, because
Mhm.
I still had the, energy of a 21-year-old instead of the energy of a later stage life, okay? And so I could
Mhm.
overcome some of it with adrenaline and caffeine. But,
Mhm.
you truly, to be long term, you have to take care of yourself, keep yourself in physical fitness, and eat right. And the last piece is to get some rest periodically and divert into somewhere else. Take up a Take up an activity that's completely different from what your work is, because you can't
Mhm.
all be one flavor. You've gotta have something else going on in your life that's interesting, that's fun. Mine happened to be church and singing. So recently, I've
Yeah.
joined a community choir, and my community choir chorale is very intense. We have a very intense doctrinaire conductor that will call you out at any moment. So it's a great challenge, and it pulls me completely out of the business I'm in on a daily basis now, so I have to be somebody different. So,
Mm.
focus yourself, take care of your body, eating and what you do for exercise on a regular basis, and find something to divert your mind away a little bit. And then the last piece is spend some time in the morning alone, just thinking about your day. And you might
Mm.
start with a reading for whatever is important to you, whether it be spiritual or faith based or just current events, but spend some time thinking about your day before you launch your day. And there's a lot of learning that says that if you have a bigger, busier day, you should spend more time reading before you start the day because you need to have a bigger base before you go attack the world.
Wow. There's some wisdom right there. It's some that some of us need. Spend more time listening
Yeah, a lot more time.
early in the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting as you bring it up. My wife and I spend a lot of like what most of our peers would probably consider wasteful time early in the day. We have a rule in our house that we do break from time to time, but we're getting better and better at enforcing it. And it is we don't be rushed.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise thing to do, but I don't think people learn that young.
Mm-mm.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. I was the picture of the fireman. The bell went off, and I jumped in the pole and slid down the level and fell into my
Mhm.
boots as I fell out of bed and took off running. And the reality is, what you're saying is very important to put that base in before you start the day.
Yeah. From an intentional leadership perspective, I just want people listening to know that you have permission. And if we start with that, like you have permission to start the day slow. and that it's okay. And if nothing else, one simple behavior, and we teach this all the time. So just don't get into this thing. Don't get into the phone first thing. Like let that if you can. And my wife calls me on it all the time, but I need to let that sit for at least 30 minutes after at the onset of the day, to just let it sit and go pick up my Bible instead, and go pick up my journal instead, or go pick up the book I'm reading instead. I like this Airbnb. I don't have a hot tub at home. It has a hot tub. I've been grabbing the hot tub and a hot cup of coffee for about half an hour as I start the day. And I just go out and I say, "Good morning, Father. What do you got for me today? What's the assignment?" Right. And I just try to download whatever he has, and then I go write it down when I'm done. So,
We all have a calling. It's whether we're listening or not. But there's a lot of research that says that if the first thing you see in the morning is the phone, you have a lesser optimal day than if you take the first hour to be away from the phone. So I try not to look at the face of the phone. I mean, a lot of people are like, what do my stocks do overnight? What's my position look like? How did my corn market move? And
yeah.
stay away from that for the first hour so you can kind of settle yourself into life first.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Greg, it's been a true masterclass. This is great. I can't wait to share this with everybody. If there's somebody out there who knows they need some consulting from you on these things, and I'm hearing a lot about, like, wow, if I needed help on change management, especially in a large organization, I'm calling Greg. Right now, if I need help in getting people bought in, I'm going to call Greg right now. That's what I'm gleaning from this, and I'm sure there's plenty more around that. But how do we get in touch? How do we find you?
I have a website, GL Mills and Associates. If you Google it, it'll pop up.
Okay.
I have some clients that I've worked with on there already. Not all of them, but some of them, and
Mhm.
some blog material if you want to look at some of the things I've experienced and what I've been through. Drones in agriculture, for instance, we were on the cutting edge of drones in agriculture. About 2012, we wrote the regulations with the FAA. I've written up that story in there. That was an
Yeah.
idea from some guys that came back from Afghanistan and Iraq, and they said, "What about this?" And of
Mm.
course, as a learning leader, I said, "You're crazy." And then it turned out it was the right thing. Okay. And you apologize to them. But so
Yeah.
get a hold of me on the website. I have a group of people that work together loosely as associates, apply ourselves to the problem at hand, whether it's due diligence or coaching. Or I've worked with companies in India, companies in agriculture in India, and companies in the film industry in India, actually. And so multiple cultures, and we'll pull people in as needed.
Beautiful. Very good, sir. Well, thank you. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with the intentional agribusiness leader audience. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
Well, I appreciate it. Most people don't listen. I just appreciate somebody to listen to what I had to say.
We do our best. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.